السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. Welcome to this live stream with Care Michigan. And today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Josiah Walker. And before I bring him on, along with my colleague and Care Michigan lead staff attorney, the reason why we're having this conversation is that we know that since October 7th, 2023, with the beginning of the second catastrophe, Nakba, against our Palestinian brothers and sisters, there has been a quelling of free speech in regards to the human rights violations and war crimes of the Israeli government all throughout the United States of America. And one of the locations in which there's been, I would even use the term intellectual terrorism, and the stifling of free speech has ironically been on college campuses all throughout the United States of America. The state of Michigan is no different. And unfortunately, University of Michigan has been ranked one of the most prestigious public liberal arts universities in these United States of America, is in fact one of the biggest offenders of squashing free speech and public debate, especially when it comes to the human rights and the dignity of the Palestinian people. So within that context, we have Mr. Josiah Walker, who is joining us, who is a student at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a organizer on campus. And we also have our staff attorney, Sister Amy, who is with us, who has been involved in legal advocacy and also giving Know Your Rights presentations to students at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to thank you very much for coming on in your busy schedule. And you are one of the, I would say, of the students at the University of Michigan, one of the foremost people that have hands-on experience, including having police putting their hands on you, unfortunately, and locking you up. Alhamdulillah, you're free, and you've had your charges dropped. But we want to have you on in particular to talk about it, not simply because you're an organizer and you've been subjected to the quashing of free speech on campus, but you're at the intersection of being a Muslim man and also an African American man. So, if any demographic in the American society and state of Michigan, you would be of the most profiled people in America and in the state of Michigan. So, we want to bring you on as a voice and talk about your experiences. But I'd like to lead off with a question, Brother Josiah. And, I can think that when I was a university student and got involved in, rallies and, raising political awareness, political education, I know what motivated me to get involved in that work, in which, I'm still doing today with a little less hair and more gray in my beard from those days. But, I'd like to kind of get a sense and let the viewing audience get a sense, like, what has motivated you, to be, involved in campus, organizing and activism, especially around the issue of Palestine, given that it's probably the most contentious issue that can be organized around, probably in the socio-political discourse in the United States of America.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that question. When I think about my presence on campus, I've always been involved in social political issues. Normally, people like wanted to work with me, and some of the issues weren't as controversial. So, for example, voter engagement, strictly nonpartisan voter engagement. Normally, people are receptive to wanting to make sure that the voting base is informed and that they're participating in elections. There have been other issues that have been difficult to work with because they're like emotionally taxing, but still nevertheless important. So, for example, the university had an old sexual misconduct policy that allowed perpetrators to directly cross-examine their victims, and I worked with a couple of other students to get the university to understand that that policy was like not okay, not trauma informed. Um, and when you think about the geopolitical history of the student body or of the University of Michigan as a whole, the city of Dearborn sits about 30 minutes away, 30-40 minute drive. It is home to the highest number of Arabs in the entire United States. And a lot of those students are graduating from high school in Dearborn and then coming to the University of Michigan. And then we look at the history of the University of Michigan itself. It was one of the few institutions to not implement insane restrictions against Jewish student admission back when a lot of major institutions were doing so. So the history of the university contains a strong Arab presence, a strong Muslim presence, and it also contains a strong Jewish presence and subsequently a strong Zionist presence. And so I noticed that in like working on various issues across campus, I was constantly running into this issue about Palestine. And interestingly, I entered college having never heard the word Palestine and not knowing that Israel existed as a concept outside the Bible days. For background context, I was born Christian. I converted to Islam. And so, when I got to campus and people were saying, "Oh, Israel, Israel, Israel," I was like, "Oh, why do people care about this ancient biblical city? Like, who cares?" And every time I'd ask people about it, they give like a really impassioned response. Um, and so I started learning about the issue on my own. And that's when I started to realize just how like core it was to like university politics on this campus. I remember in one setting, I was sitting with a group of people and someone said, my grandpa was sitting at the table when Israel was founded. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then in another setting, I was sitting with someone who said that one of their close relatives was a former chief negotiator for the Palestinians. And I was like, oh, that's really crazy. Um, and so, as time went on, I started to learn a little bit more about the issue. I also saw the political context around it and how, like, remaining silent about Palestine could, when I say open doors, I don't mean like, oh, it's opening doors. Well, actually, I do. Like, I do mean that. Like, remaining silent on Palestine, like, you don't have to actively be pro-Israel to say, or per se, but like just remaining silent about Palestine um, will keep like a lot of animosity away from you. People wouldn't view you as a threat, and so they were willing to share opportunities and financial resources with you. Um, Deep down inside, I kind of knew that what I was seeing was wrong, but I think the fear of like what could happen to my political future, my professional future, kind of prevented me from speaking up. And then over time, after seeing other people on campus speak up, I kind of mustered the courage to let the disconnect between my inner self and my outer self like dissolve.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, I learned a couple of things that you said right there, and I think there's two things that you said that were really important for us to digest, not just for the viewing audience, but I'm digesting them right now. Is that number one, as a man on campus and also as a Muslim, that you were involved on campus around organizing and activism around interests that aren't so-called Muslim specific. And I think that's very important for us to understand that every issue that takes place in America and every issue on campus, there is a Muslim perspective. And uh, the Islamic framework of justice is that justice doesn't mean just us. Like if you're black, justice doesn't mean just black folks. If justice doesn't mean just for the Muslims. So I'm glad that you start off with that your presence on campus and what you were doing was not just Muslim specific. And I mean, even with the issue of Palestine, we tend to forget that, even about 10% of Palestinians actually are Christians. They're not all Muslims, so it's all, but a vast majority are. Um, Another point that you mentioned, just for us to think about, and maybe this is for some of the younger people who are watching, but if you, as someone who was going to a prestigious university like the University of Michigan, had never heard of Palestine, and your only reference for Israel was the Hebrew Bible, then how many other people who are in high school or going to undergrad around the country have no clue and no political education about where Palestine is, what is its history, who are its people? So this is basically, we can say, is an opportunity for political education, uh,
Hmm.
and a particular demographic of society that obviously has been skipped over. And I think many people in our community just happen to take for granted and think that everyone knows what Palestine is or where it is, when obviously that's not the case. So and you weren't someone who was like an illiterate person. You're going to University of Michigan Ann Arbor, for God's sake. So there's tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of young people just like you who are in high school right now or just graduated high school about to go to university. So I just wanted to like double click on those points. Sister Amy?
Yeah. So, Josiah, you attended the encampment last summer at University of Michigan, yes?
Yes, I did. I slept there every night. Well, I didn't go to sleep every single night, but I stayed there throughout the night and the day.
So, what lessons did you take away from the encampment, especially as it relates to students who maybe are neither Muslim nor Arab?
Yeah, so I think being at the encampment helped me understand that a lot more people care about Palestine than like one may think. I think when people hear Palestine, they think, oh, mostly like Muslim and Muslim adjacent spaces are gonna care. But at the encampment, we had people from all walks of life who were very much so committed, would show up daily, would volunteer with like for food distribution or setting up tents or maintaining like the cleanliness of the space, as well as participating in like educational activities, et cetera, et cetera. And in terms of observing like interactions and also just engaging in some of those interactions as well, I noticed that people want to always be as well versed in like regarding religious expectations or like cultural norms. Um, and that like a little like gentle like nudge to say like, hey, you know, I'm Muslim, so like X, Y, and Z are acceptable, but like one, two, and three are not. Um, or hey, like, here are some of like the cultural expectations in the space. Could definitely go a long way. But it shouldn't be assumed that people will know what the expectations or norms are going in. Um, and at the same time, just because they aren't as familiar with the expectations or norms doesn't mean that they're not able to like one, quickly learn them, and two, be really solid allies. Um, and I think even from a Muslim perspective, it's kind of like an opportunity to give dawah, but through actions. So you think we everyone's familiar with dawah tables, and speaking as a convert, uh, Christians have similar concepts. I personally look at dawah tables and I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna make a decision to change my religion on my way to class, but I'm still trying to remember what I learned in lecture the other day. Um, But when I was making the decision to become Muslim, something that factored into the decision was looking at the character of my friends who were Muslim, and they had upstanding character, even when it was difficult. And right now, um, there seems to be like a pretty significant increase in the amount of people who are converting to Islam. And I'll reach out to them like as a convert and say, hey, like what inspired you to become Muslim? And a lot of them are citing the steadfastness of Palestinians despite enduring genocide, and their faith that's like unshakable. And they even see that among their peers on campus. Um, and so like twofold, it's like, okay, here's an opportunity to practice patience. Here's an opportunity to share more about your religion. And sorry, and here's an opportunity to be used as a tool to guide someone to Islam.
I think those are all like really great takeaways. It is interesting as a convert as well to think back to like becoming Muslim and like what motivates people, and then also like interacting still with some of my family who don't know the cultural norms. And it's true, sometimes it's just lack of exposure, right,
Mm-hmm.
to those cultural norms. So that's great. Like I think one of the takeaways we took from the encampment here at Care Michigan is that started especially at University of Michigan, a host of law enforcement activity, like a flurry of law enforcement activity and issues, fake or real, about campus security, and that you kind of ended up getting kind of caught up in. So can you kind of just, overview what your general take on policing and surveillance on campus has been like since the encampment?
Yeah, so once upon a time there wasn't a single political issue or like movement on campus that one I didn't know about and wasn't friends with like either like top leadership or like second like in command leadership. And I'd examine the police activity. Often there wasn't police activity. The last time I can remember police activity for some sort of like student action was during a climate change sit-in, and that police activity was like minimal. It was solely the University of Michigan Police Department, and it didn't happen until that night. And I think there were like what 3 vehicles maximum. But with all things Palestine, uh, you don't only have the University of Michigan police getting involved, but you also have like 8 to 9 different departments from like the surrounding area getting involved. It's almost as if like the police department puts out a mutual aid request anytime they see anything related to Palestine. And then in terms of like the level of aggression that the police are using, often when the police showed up to other political activities, they were there to, make sure vehicles didn't hit us, and to like facilitate the demonstration within reason. Obviously, like police are police, so I don't think they really like care one way or the other for like a lot of the previous demonstrations. But with this one, there's just like a level of like anger that the police are utilizing against pro-Palestine protesters, and that anger isn't just something that you can like see on their faces. It's something that like translates into physical action, where police are using like very aggressively shoving and like pushing protesters. Police are using their batons and striking protesters. I know multiple female students who have bruises on their body because they were hit with batons, which is kind of crazy because these officers are like grown men. It's like, why are you striking students who are fresh out of high school, let alone girls? Um, you know, Pepper spray has also been used quite liberally and indiscriminately. And the pepper spray that is being used at the University of Michigan, it's not like your standard pepper spray or even your standard police pepper spray. It's a combination of pepper spray and tear gas. It's produced by like a prominent pepper spray company, and they advertise this product as their most effective incapacitating agent, and that is not false advertising. If you talk to anyone who's been pepper sprayed by the pepper, like by the real deal, um, it takes a really long time to get out your eyes. It's excruciatingly painful. It like not stains your clothes. It dyes your clothes, dyes cell phone cases. And when I say the police are using it indiscriminately, each time they deploy pepper spray, they end up spraying their own officers. This is like every single time that pepper spray has been deployed against pro-Palestine protesters, police officers have also been sprayed. Um, and it's not like the police officers are um, using the stream. I think everyone has used like a chemical spray bottle where you can like twist the little nozzle and you can either get like a straight stream or like a spray. They're using the spray. So they're definitely hitting like a wider group of people. And then, there are at least 2 photos where officers weren't even looking as they were pepper spraying. Quite literally, they're spraying at people and like just looking away. There was another incident where like students were quite literally just walking away, and there was like a lot of distance between the officer and the students. Again, pepper spray is being utilized. And the force just keeps escalating, as if pepper spray wasn't bad when it comes to like how they arrest students. One, way more arrests are associated with pro-Palestine like protests, not because students or like protesters are being like violent, but because the police are actively targeting people who they think are in leadership, or who they think, if they target this person, then that should have a domino effect and chilling speech across the board.
And to be clear, you're specifically talking about campus police, correct?
Yes, campus police. People think, oh, it's Ann Arbor police, like city police or like county police. No, these are campus police. That's something that's really important for people to understand. People think, oh, these are university police. They're going to be more gentle with students because they work with students. No, they're actually crazier, which is crazy to think about as well. Because city police and like county police, the situations that they're dealing with on a daily basis are probably a bit more dangerous than what like university police officers are dealing with. And so a university police officer will see a situation and they'll be like, ah, this demands like a rapid escalation of force. Whereas like city and like county police officers will be a bit confused about like what's going on. Um, but the physical force isn't limited to that. It extends to police like slamming people to the ground. I know this because I was slammed to the ground by a group of officers, and all those officers swarmed on top of me. And ironically, when this happened, I wasn't even participating in the demonstration that was taking place. I was standing on the side and watching and recording. And the police know that I record them, particularly when they do like bad things. Um, and so they like ran up from behind me, slammed me to the ground. Next thing you know, there are several officers, like basically one at each limb, and then several more officers like come into the area and surrounding me. And I was just like, I remember being on the ground and thinking like, what the heck? Like, what the heck is going on? Um, And then I also remember an officer kind of like taking my arm, like my left shoulder, and he was like lifting it and like pushing it down, lifting it and pushing it down. And I was like, ah, I know what you're doing. Like you're trying to make it look like I'm resisting. And that's like something that's like really, really dangerous about what the police are doing on campus. Like the police here, they're not stupid. They use like slide tactics to make it look like someone is resisting an officer because if you get like if a prosecutor thinks that you're resisting, you can be charged with a felony. So you end up in felony court. Obviously, being charged with a felony has a lot of other implications. And then even when people read it, oh, they were like resisting an officer, like resisting an obstruction, resistance and obstruction is considered an assaultive crime. So it just sounds like you're assaulting an officer. That just carries a lot of connotations with it. And it's the fact that the officers are willing to like make it seem as if people are resisting on body camera that makes it dangerous. It's the fact that the officers are willing to like lie in their reports or omit information in their reports that makes the situation especially dangerous. And then on the top of lying and omitting pieces of information, they have also recruited the state attorney general to press charges against students. The most recent waves of charges have been dropped, but the attorney general is still expressing interest in bringing more charges in the future. But some of the charges that the attorney general has prosecuted are things as small as trespass. And I say as small as trespass because trespass is a misdemeanor. It's normally handled at the county level. Why are like state taxpayer dollars being used to prosecute alleged trespass? Like that's insane. And so I remember when Dana Nessel's office, and Dana Nessel is the Attorney General of Michigan, made a press release announcing that people will be facing charges for the encampment. Um, She also included our full government names on live arrest warrants, which is insane because you would think like, oh, these people did something horrible that like the government, the Attorney General's office is publishing their full name on a live arrest warrant. I hadn't received a call, an email, or anything. I found out through a freaking group chat. Um, and when you look at the names of other individuals that are included in different press releases, like they're being charged with like pretty insane things, like I'm like, this is like these alleged crimes are like not equal at all. And then jail. So in addition to everything that I've mentioned, and like the list actually goes on, but like I'm literally running out of like air to speak. Um, when I was arrested, for whatever reason, um, the university police department broke their norm and decided that I needed to stay in jail overnight. So for context, normally people will be arrested and then taken to the police station and processed, or taken to the jail and processed, and then released the same day. Um, so when the police officers when they tackled me and then arrested me, in my head I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. They're upset because I'm recording them. That was like one of the first things that they went for as they were throwing me down to the ground was my cell phone. That was like their priority. I was like, wait a minute. Um, But then being in jail and like listening to the jail guards tell me, hey, you're going to be here until Friday, which is when your arraignment would have been. I was like, wait, what? By the way, Friday, I was arrested on a Wednesday. And so being held until Friday would have been me being held in jail for 3 days. Um, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but like it's one thing to know how long you're going to be held somewhere, but when you're completely taken off guard, and again, I was not participating in the demonstration, I was simply like watching and observing. And so in my head, I was like, okay, like the risk that I'll get arrested is extremely low. To be caught off guard like that, and then to be held in jail indefinitely, it's like really nerve-wracking. It's really eye-opening. Um, that Friday, so at the end of that like 2-day, 3-day period, that Friday would have just been my arraignment. Meaning technically I could be held in jail for longer if the police tried to make the case that, I shouldn't be released um until my trial was over. And so there were just like a lot of things going through my mind that night. And it also just didn't make sense. I'm like, okay, like you guys are upset that I recorded you. You're saying that I trespassed, but you're holding me in jail like overnight and you haven't done this to anyone else. And like, I'm worried about like saying this on air too, because I'm like, okay, well, now that I say this, watch them try to hold other people in jail overnight so they can say, oh, we're doing it to everyone. Um, but yeah, and then we had another student be held in jail overnight as well, for 4 days actually. And that was a product of another police tactic that's being utilized on campus. And that's the one that I think most people are familiar with, which is the plainclothes surveillance. And saying plainclothes doesn't really do it justice. These law enforcement elements, they're part of a security firm that the university is contracting. They do not wear any visible identifiers. They do not drive around in marked vehicles. You have no way to ascertain like who these people are, like unless their behavior gives them away. And so I remember last summer, I was just like going about my life, and um, I ended up having a dream that I was being surveilled, and I decided, okay, I would just be more aware of my surroundings. But I originally like shrugged it off because it was after the encampment. The police were at the encampment every day, so I was like, maybe this is just like a residual from the encampment. And I noticed that like every time I leave work, a strange vehicle would appear at about the same amount of time, and it wasn't always the same vehicle, but there was always a vehicle that would appear at about the same amount of time, as if it was like waiting around the corner. Um, so I thought to myself, oh, that's weird. And I occasionally take photos and videos. Um, and then as time went on, I started noticing that this wasn't like a mere coincidence, but like the same vehicles were popping up wherever I went on campus, and even off campus. And the same people were also popping up wherever I went on campus and even off campus. And they were constantly taking photos and videos. Um, you know, so I was like thinking to myself, okay, like literally, like who are these people? Like what's going on? Like, is this a real group of Zionists trying to target me, or is this like some sort of like police activity? And it wasn't until later that year, like in the fall, that I realized that the group was one, um, a university contractor, and two, was like retained to target pro-Palestine students. And I was able to reach that conclusion after seeing seeing so many of the same surveillance operatives at different like pro-Palestine demonstrations on campus exhibiting the same behavior and then not seeing them anywhere else. Um, and so yeah, I mean, the list can actually go on and on and on, but I don't want to like talk people's heads off. But the university is pioneering a lot of different tactics in order to try to suppress pro-Palestine protests. Um, the plainclothes surveillance one is actually exceptionally dangerous because people feel a bit more emboldened when they're not wearing a badge or uniform that makes it obvious who they're connected to. And there are like two videos circulating online with an interaction that I had with one of the surveillance operatives who, on multiple occasions, pretended to be disabled. Um, and then, like, once he got caught, he got like really, really upset, and that's when he went on the tirade where he, uh, accused me of threatening him and accused me of trying to steal his wallet, which was also like quite insane because that video was taken in the dead of night. Okay, so like to paint a picture, you have this older white man who is yelling at the top of his lungs and pointing to this black student saying, "He's threatening me. He's threatening me. He wants my wallet." What the heck? Like, there's really like no room for interpretation there. Like, what you see is what you get. I think what's especially alarming, in addition to like everything else that's especially alarming, is that I wasn't secretly recording him when this interaction exchanged. It's not like I was holding my phone at like wrist level and being like, ooh, I was literally holding my phone at like chest face level, being like, and like this is what he's willing to do when he knows he's being recorded. He sees that the camera light is on. He probably understands how cell phones work. Um, and so there's no saying what like he's willing to do off camera. And again, he's not the only one. The surveillance presence is on campus 24/7, 365. Um, there have been times in the middle of the night where someone from the surveillance team will pop up or spot me, and the rest of the surveillance team will pop up, even in the middle of the day. And then again, off campus. So you think, okay, all I have to do is leave campus and I'll be safe. But like, no, because now you're like clearly off campus and the same like group of people are there, or someone's acting suspicious and they're exhibiting like the same sort of behavior that the other surveillance operatives exhibit. And you're like, oh, here we go again. Um, and they're also like talking to someone. It's not like the surveillance operatives don't know who I am. There have been some occasions where they tried to say my name and they would say Josh, or Joshua. That's like the most common way that people mispronounce my name. They see Josiah and they're like Joshua. And I'm like, oh, so you have some sort of file where you're like reading about me. Like this is creepy. This is weird. Um, and the operatives are like men, women, black, white, racially ambiguous. There's just like a lot to unpack. I'm gonna take some water. Hold on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think for me the probably the scariest thing that you talk about is the surveilling you off campus, right? There can be no legitimate claim that University of Michigan is trying to like secure their campus when they clearly have a private firm that is following, and what it sounds like from what we're hearing at some points even harassing students on campus for their off campus for on campus free speech activities. That to me is probably some of the most problematic things I think that have come out of what we are slowly learning about the actions that University of Michigan took after the encampment, how far they are willing to go to, kind of scare students into waiving their right to free speech. It's really, really scary. It's very draconian in my opinion. Brother Dawood, you have a follow up?
Yeah, well, when you were talking, it jogged my memory. I remember seeing you, and you told me that you believed that you were being surveilled. I remember that very vividly, and that you had the dream too. And we as Muslims, we believe in the physical and metaphysical, and this reminds me of me thinking that it's probably like ru'ya salihah, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending you a message, I mean, obviously we're not prophets, so we don't get wahi in that sense, but dreams can be a truthful dream, a truthful vision is a form of communication from Allah. And, I believe that Allah was, despite you being arrested, that he was protecting you in a sense. I also remember when Sheikh Arbor and I came there, we actually came to the jail, when you were arrested and then when you got out. It just reminds me, may Allah reward you and raise your maqam. You weren't looking to be arrested, but, you were tested through that. And, I can say is from my personal experience of being arrested in DC, protesting in front of former Speaker of the House, Ryan's office. It's no fun, having handcuffs, on you tight, and how that guy who was the paid surveillance person, who wasn't an actual law enforcement officer, is no doubt about it that he was using race, in saying that, that you were trying to steal his wallet, that he's an older white man faking like he's disabled to a young black man. That's the quickest way of getting the police to actually not only potentially arrest someone, but many a Black person have been beaten up by the police, brutalized over false allegations, even some killed. So Allah protected you, alhamdulillah, through that. As far as uh, State AG Daniel Nessel, I'm not going to comment any further on her. But what you said was very compelling, and you were talking more so about the University of Michigan and the campus police, and as well as that firm that they hired. We believe that is totally uncalled for uh, and and illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But we won't go into any more of that right now. But as you know, Brother Josiah, I'd like to, besides looking at outside and what people are doing, I also are really big on looking at ourselves as Muslims and, being introspective and us trying to do better and maybe even, correct some of our deficiencies, because we can do better, not just individuals, but as a community. So I kind of like have a two-part question for you, and then we can kind of like wrap it up. But when American Muslims in Michigan, and even more specifically on campuses, but we can take it to the broader community here in Michigan, even outside of campuses. And we're talking about we're advocating on behalf of Palestine for Palestinians. Part of advocacy is building trust, right? Like if we want to, broaden our actions, there has to be a level of trust building that's involved. And for the Muslim, I think so. The two parts is that we as Muslims in Michigan are very diverse. We have Bengalis, people of Bengali origin, Indian, Pakistani, Turkish. There are Malaysian international students on campus. We have Arab Americans from different national backgrounds, Iranian Americans, African Americans, white Americans who come from convert backgrounds, such as all three of us. We entered Islam. We weren't born into families in which both parents were Muslims. So I would just say, what do you think we can do better? Number one, to build trust, intra-Muslim trust amongst Muslims from different ethnic and theological backgrounds, between Black folks who are Muslims, Arab folks who are Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, number one. Then number two, what do you think we can do better regarding Palestine as far as building bridges with fellow Americans who are not Muslims, who like come from Jewish backgrounds, Christian backgrounds, agnostic backgrounds? Like, what's your take? I know this is a big question that has two parts, but I'd like to hear your take on that, since you're in the mix with these different demographics.
Yeah, so to answer your first question about what we can do as Muslims, like internally, uh, this is actually something that I thought about while in jail. I was like, oh, no wonder. Um, I think when Muslims poorly treat other Muslims, that doesn't only like harm like the Muslim who's like being mistreated, but also harms the Muslim who's doing the mistreating, and it makes them weaker. Because if you can't treat your fellow Muslims with respect, if you don't have the courage, and it shouldn't require a lot of courage to treat your fellow Muslims with respect, you're definitely not going to have the courage, the bravery, or the steadfastness to look a tyrant in the eye and say, hey, you need to stop. You're definitely not going to have the courage, the bravery, or the steadfastness that's needed to look at a rogue police department and say, like, okay, they're doing what they're doing, but I'm going to continue my advocacy. You're definitely not going to have the courage to look at an entity that's being supported by the U.S. military to say, like, hey, like, this is unacceptable, and to take actions to like reduce the ability for that entity to continue causing harm. And so I think as a Muslim community, we really have to reconsider how we're treating like one another, because when we like enter a space and we try to point the finger at like non-Muslims and say like, oh, you're treating Muslims badly, we're being, but we're not treating each other like with respect. We're being hypocritical. And something that I've learned through like a very immersive experience is that like anytime I was like slacking in areas as a Muslim that like I knew about or shouldn't be slacking in or just like weren't as much of a challenge for me as like other areas, that definitely translated in like my advocacy as well, where you know I'd be afraid to do like certain things or to stand up when I knew I should have stood up. And like it kind of like makes sense, you know, uh in the scheme of things. I think there's also, at least from like the Muslim communities I've interacted with, like the Shia Sunni divide, which it's really, really interesting to me because like as a convert, I'm like, guys, you have no idea what it's like to be Muslim. Like we're Muslim. Like like granted, maybe people like we all have like the same like metaphorical cake, right? Maybe we're using different icing and like sprinkles on the cake, but guys, we have the same cake. That's what matters. Like we can do something with this. And that's like so important to me because like growing up Christian, uh, you don't have the same metaphorical cake. You know, your understanding of God is a Trinitarian understanding. And you think, oh, this is like monotheism. It's like all three are one and one is all three. But then you become Muslim because like, you know, you realize that your understanding is like fundamentally incorrect. It's like maybe the religions are similar, but where they differ is where it's like most important, you know? But within the Muslim community, like we're on the same page regarding what's most important.
Mhm.
And so we should be able to like work together toward common goals, you know, and like the smaller disagreements can be set aside for like the greater good. Like no one is saying like, hey, in order to do like Palestine advocacy, you have to go from being Shia to Sunni, or you have to go from being Sunni to Shia. It's just saying like, hey, just acknowledge that the other person is Muslim and figure out ways to work with them. And that like, shouldn't be as difficult as some people make it out to be. And the advocacy depends on it because again, like if we're not treating our fellow Muslims with respect, then we can't we can't expect the outside world to do so when the outside world sees us as an enemy for like other reasons. Um, and we're in no position to demand that they do so either. And then as for you know building relationships with non-Muslims, it's similar. You know, so people, even though non-Muslims may not be our siblings by faith, they're still our siblings by Adam. And kind of like alluding to what I mentioned earlier, the way that like we conduct ourselves in our advocacy and our activism and under like against or under duress um, can encourage people to like look into Islam and convert. And so, you know, someone who you're interacting with in that moment may not be Muslim then, but they're still saying what could happen in the future. And from a deeds perspective, like wouldn't it be great to like die and then Allah tells you, oh, like I used you to guide this person to Islam. Like just imagine how many good deeds uh you can get for that. Um and then ultimately, like you don't have to be Muslim to care about Palestine. I think that's as like crazy as it sounds. It's like guys, like there are people who aren't Muslim who care. Whether they're other people at the book, so Christians and Jews, or people who don't come from like a faith background at all, or people who come from like other faith backgrounds. And you know that's okay. There are ways to work together with people from different backgrounds. I'm reminded of a verse in the Quran where it says, you know, had Allah willed, He would have made us all one nation. If Allah wanted to make us all Muslim, He would have, but He didn't. So the fact that we live in a world where everyone isn't Muslim isn't something that Allah was like, oh, I wasn't planning for this to happen, so we shouldn't be like alarmed.
Alhamdulillah. I appreciate your comments and your insight. It's had me thinking. You know, as I think that those who are watching this right now live and in its entirety should really listen to and ponder what Brother Josiah is saying. Uh, as someone who is raised in a Christian environment and willfully and lovingly accepts Islam, because and based upon oneness, right? There's one God, there's one human family, and there's one ummah. That's really powerful because oneness is very important in Islam. And I will just say, and then leave it for any final comment. Maybe Sister Amy wants to add on something, but I think a mistake that a lot of Muslims make, frankly, who are immigrants to the United States of America or children of immigrants, is that they expect those who enter Islam or the convert to accept all of their sensibilities, right? In their understanding of Islam. And that's actually a mistake, and it actually cheapens the diversity within the ummah to think that, oh, well, you have this animosity from your country between this tribe and this tribe, or between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, and then I have to pick a side. I don't have to pick either side. Actually, I don't have to pick either side. I can actually disagree with both sides if they're at each other's necks, because I came to Islam through the guidance of Allah and understand on my terms, and I've studied this religion. So, I think that's a mistake, and I would caution people when they come across new converts, be they white Americans, African Americans, Latinos, or others, to try to push, their tribal identities or sectarianism on us. That's no bueno. Anything like to add on, Sister Amy, before we let Brother Josiah close out with any final thoughts or comments?
I don't think so. I think I really enjoyed the session. Thank you, Brother Josiah, for agreeing to do this. I know it's not easy to get out here and talk about something that happened to you, so that's so personal, and is actually so troubling, honestly. If you look at the whole realm of things, that the gamut of what you've been through, the encampment, the mass surveillance, the ridiculous charges by the AG, and then we won't even talk about how she tried to increase your charges for something that happened after she charged you, or before she even charged. It's just crazy. So I really appreciate that, and I think my takeaway from what you've said today is basically there's we really have strength in numbers. We just have to know how to treat people and how to have that appropriate and respectful dialogue, and I really appreciate that, honestly. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I hope that, whatever I said can be a benefit. And if it's not a benefit, then please forgive me.
Oh, I mean, no, it was definitely beneficial. And I believe that those who are watching will get benefit from what you said. And with that, my brothers and sisters in Islam and in humanity who are watching this right now, just remind you all to please keep the people of Palestine, especially those in Gaza, in your prayers right now. People are getting massacred, just going to get food, starving children with pots, women who've lost their husbands, people sleeping in open air in the summertime, are being shot to go get food. They're being starved. Also, the bombs that are dropping right now in civilian areas and targeting newsrooms and hitting schools in Iran and Tehran. Please remember them and keep them in your prayers. And whether you agree with the government of Iran or not, those children and babies that are being killed, they didn't have a choice of who the government is. Those women who are being killed didn't have a choice in the matter. Those elderly people who can't even get medicine because the hospital is being bombed in Iran, they don't have a choice in the matter of who the leader is or who is not the leader, but they have bombs dropping on their heads. So let us, not let our, political animus some of us may have, harm our actual humanity, harm our hearts, you know, bugged or rancor, loathing is a better word. Loathing or hatred actually blinds hearts. It blinds hearts. So we don't want to be blinded. With that, we will conclude. May Allah's peace, mercy, and His blessings be with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.